Hello and welcome to Hope for Dystonia. My name is Federico. You can call me Fede. I am the creator of Hope for Dystonia, which is now the single most comprehensive, empowering, and transformative dystonia program out there. The best place for you to unlearn old patterns and learn new ones that help you live your life as fully as you deserve to. This video is a bit different. I want to tell you my story, but perhaps from a different perspective, in a different way. You might have seen my video titled My Dystonia Recovery Story. I got my life back, and so can you. Today, I want to tell you about what led to dystonia and kind of the difficult aspects of those years. And I don't want this to be something scripted. I don't have, points in mind that I want to share with you. I just want this to be a way for you guys to get to know me, right? And to understand that you may be going through something really hard that feels very unique, like very few people can understand, but actually there's people who do, right? There's people who have gone through this and come out of this. And so I hope that this video, number one, helps you know me a little bit more, and also helps you feel that you're not alone, right? And that things can get better. So let's get right into it. I want to start by telling you about my family. And it is important because so much of the trauma that we carry from our family background contributes to our health as adults. And this is certainly the case for me. And I see it all the time with the people that I work with. So I was born to a mixed family. My mother is from a Jewish Syrian Lebanese family. She was born in the Middle East and arrived in Italy as a child. And my father is Italian, not Jewish. And this is relevant because there is a lot of trauma around that, around all of the things that I mentioned just now. My mother was in her mother's womb when the Jews of Syria were essentially kicked out following violent pogroms against them in Aleppo, the city where they were living. So my grandmother, pregnant, and her children, her husband, had to flee almost on a moment's notice. And that was a traumatic experience, profoundly traumatic. Imagine leaving everything that you've known and everything that you've built, and on a moment's notice, just starting from scratch in a new country. So they left to Lebanon. And later, they had to flee Lebanon as well, and they had to start over from scratch once again, each time fleeing anti-Semitic persecution. And these traumas, they stay with us, right? They stay with us in more than one way. They stay with us because we behave differently when we're traumatized and we're not able to be there for our loved ones in the same ways. And this is certainly true for how my mother's family members were or were not able to be there for her. And so that impacts how the nervous system evolves, right? And when we are not able to have experiences of safety, of attunement, of delight in who we are, our nervous systems never develop the infrastructure that allows us to be resilient and healthy in the face of life's challenges. That is one way. There are also epigenetic expressions of trauma, right? Where we essentially encode in our DNA certain experiences, the impact of certain traumatic experiences. And that influences how our genes are expressed. And so in my case, I really feel how both the intergenerational trauma at a psychological level and the intergenerational trauma at a genetic and epigenetic level, how both of those are really present for me, right? And just how much my body stores the trauma of all of this. And this is a continuous learning journey and a journey of continuous release. And it's not something where, I feel like I have arrived somewhere, right? The more I learn to work with trauma, the more I learn to work with the body and to bring compassion to both and to allow life to kind of just flow through my nervous system. The more I do those things, the more I discover that there is more, right? There is more that stands in the way of me just being able to surrender fully to the divine, which is what happens when the trauma is really healed. And you might be able to tell that I'm already getting teary-eyed because this is really big. And I'll say that this is my story, right? But I see this with my clients all the time. I see how this disconnection from the divine, right? How the trauma that I describe, both psychological and other kinds, right? But this wounding that we carry within really impacts the ways our nervous systems function and whether or not we're able to stay regulated in the face of life's challenges to a sufficient degree, and how, these things really make us sick. And in my work with clients, there's plenty that we can do from a spiritual perspective, right? To bring that love right where it's needed so that we can shift those patterns. And this is a big part of how I work with my own inner landscape, right? Bringing love where it's needed through all kinds of different techniques and wisdom that I have learned from various teachers of meditation in Buddhist traditions, in Jewish traditions, and more. And so I guess this is the kind of substrate, right? The real background to all of this. And growing up, there was a lot of tension between my mom and my dad. My dad is very different and comes from a background that holds a lot of prejudice for people that are different, right? And so I was different. And I didn't feel like I belonged. And that is part of my developmental trauma, right? That I never really felt safe, like I could really relax growing up. There was always something to manage, either because, my family members were dysregulated with big emotions that they didn't know how to navigate. And I felt like, in order to be safe, I had to manage and navigate those for them. Or because of these very complicated dynamics around identity and belonging and so on. And things kind of got worse when I was a teenager and I found out that I was gay. And I was outed in ways that were not of my choosing. And that was a big trauma. And the people around me were reacting in really horrible ways. Not everybody, but several of the key people in my life were reacting horribly and subjected me to several years of screaming and just real mental illness, profound mental illness that I was exposed to for several of my formative years as a teenager. And that left a very, very heavy mark on me as well. That rejection for being who I am, being something that I didn't choose. And that kind of contributed to that dysregulation that I was constantly in, right? This constant belief that I had to be tense and to fight and to, right, to try to be something that I'm not in order to be accepted. Constantly trying to hide or fix myself or what have you, right? And so these are just some of the aspects of the trauma that I faced. And there's more, but I'll perhaps mention the more physical aspects of this, right? So, like many people with dystonia, um, others in my family have, a bit of an asymmetrical cranium, right? And I was born with a bit of an asymmetrical cranium, but it wasn't very pronounced. I also have a fairly prominent jaw, right? So I have a class 3 occlusion, right? Where my jaw is just a little forward compared to others. And these dentists that I was seeing when I was little thought that was a problem that they needed to fix. And they subjected me to all kinds of torture devices that expanded my palate and did all kinds of, horrible things that did not take into account this asymmetry. And so, because those appliances didn't take into account the asymmetry, the forces that were being applied were actually not symmetrical. And at some point, one of these appliances broke. And it started malfunctioning and applying these forces in ways that were not what was intended. And that led to a cascade of interventions that these dentists tried to apply in order to correct the mess that they had done with me. And this ended up opening up my bite on my left side. And as you can see, it's still open. And this bite that is still open is the cause of a lot of the maladaptive neuroplasticity that I describe as, the main mechanism behind dystonia, right? Or one of the main ones, at least for the majority of people with dystonia. And so, because this bite was open on the left side, my brain started forgetting how to use the left side to speak, to chew, to hold on to things, and to use force, right? And the brain is plastic, so it sheds the connections that it doesn't need, and it overuses the ones that it does use. And so I ended up, as you know if you've seen my other videos, with this extreme tightness on the right side of my jaw and of my neck, and eventually my entire body was caught in this painful spasm. It was red and hot and sweaty, and everything was a struggle, and it was rigid. And the left side just kind of forgotten more and more, right? And so that's how I developed, these patterns of oromandibular dystonia and generalized kind of hemidystonia. And so we'll fast forward a few years, but for a while, this didn't really show up until one day I was at the gym and the trainer asked me to lift some weights. And I felt this unbelievable pain on the right side of my body. The entire right side of my body was just in excruciating pain. And the left side, nothing, right? And that was really weird. I tried to get help from doctors and I went to a million of them and nobody was understanding anything. And I said, okay, I guess I just can't work out at the gym. I guess I just need to maybe focus on yoga and more gentle stuff. And yoga gave me a lot of relief and I learned plenty and it helped me grow spiritually as well. But it wasn't solving the problem, obviously. And fast forward again, one day I heard my alarm clock ringing and I tried to turn around and I couldn't physically turn around, right? I couldn't reach my phone to turn off the alarm clock. And that was kind of the day that symptoms really exploded for me. And I had a hard time walking after that, and all kinds of things became really difficult. I managed to kind of get my life back after that in some way, right? To be able to function to a certain degree. with a lot of yoga, with a lot of specific kinds of exercise and so on. But really, that was very short-lived because I kept declining. And little by little, I found myself unable to do more and more stuff. And so I used to work at the United Nations, at the Mission of Israel to the UN, and I was at my desk and I could feel how even just focusing on the screen, right? My eyes would kind of contort and my whole face would start spasming, and it was just so painful and awful. And so little by little, that wasn't available for me anymore, and I couldn't explain it to anybody, right? I couldn't explain what was happening to me. I couldn't make sense of it. And when I did try to explain what was happening, people were treating me like I was crazy, like I was making it up, like I was just, being fussy, or that there was something wrong with me that was kind of my own making, right? And that was very difficult, kind of being gaslit in that way, and being misunderstood. And I felt so alone and so kind of powerless in the face of the magnitude of what was happening. But I tried to make the best of what I could do, and I found different kinds of work where I didn't have to sit at a desk. And then even that fell apart, right? Because the dystonia kind of kept preventing me from doing more and more stuff, right? And just the trauma and the emotional dysregulation was pretty prominent as well. So at a certain point, I found myself spending most of my days in bed, unable to do much, and unable to speak for more than a few minutes at a time, unable to chew most foods. It started with salads. I couldn't kind of move my jaw from side to side. And then anything that I tried to chew with my only available side, with my right side, felt like I was biting down super hard on some stone, right? And so this incredible pain would radiate in my face, kind of behind my eye and my cheek and the jaw. And yeah, this temporal area, it was a form of trigeminal neuralgia, right? Pain of this fifth cranial nerve that is so closely tied to the function of the jaw, right? So my jaw was just being jammed inside the temporomandibular joint on the right side. And that was a horrible, horrible, horrible time of my life, right? It was really, really freaking hard because nobody understood. And because the people that were supposed to be able to help me were hurting me more. The dentists that I saw were subjecting me to treatments that were based on all the wrong models and all the wrong ideas. And that's how I now, empower my clients to be sovereign and understand what their nervous systems need so that they can guide the dentists, right? And not have these horrible misguided treatments imposed to them. But at the time, I was, at some point, I was convinced by these doctors that I had to start orthodontic treatments for the millionth time in my life, to have surgery, double jaw surgery, and break up my face and fill it with titanium and just remodel it in some way that kind of would make sense to the surgeon, but that wouldn't take my nervous system into account at all. And somehow I got convinced that was what I needed. And I went with that, and things got so bad, right? That it was just obvious that this wasn't the way to go. And just to give you a little anecdote around this, these were the number one orthodontists in New York City with the most advanced kind of technology and what have you. And they were supposed to be the absolute best. And when they saw that I had this habit of giving myself stability at the time, right, with my tongue, by biting my tongue on the left side, right? They didn't say, okay, let's find a way to re-educate your tongue. Let's learn how to not do that. Let's give you something so you have stability for now and something to bite on, right? They didn't do anything of what would have been sensible. Rather, they were like, we think we're going to have to cut the left side of your tongue. These individuals that are steeped in this paradigm are just deleterious, right? They create so much harm in the world and they don't realize it. They do what they think is best, but they cause so much harm. And for a long time, I had so much anger towards them, right? They were hurting me. They were hurting people that, that I was in touch with. And I see, right, the effects of these misguided approaches in a lot of my clients that come to me after they've been butchered, right? And sometimes these misguided approaches cost people their lives, right? And yeah, I know of at least one person that ended up perishing to suicide because of just how badly she was butchered and how badly things were organized for her with her jaw and her cranium and so on. And so you see that I'm getting teary-eyed again because this is really awful, right? This is really sad and it's infuriating, right? And I had a lot of anger, right? That it took me a long time to evacuate to a decent degree, right? But I now see that it is part of my purpose to help us all grow, to help us all wake up out of these materialistic and scientific frameworks that just want to impose an idea of geometry of how things should be onto people and don't take into account how their inner worlds, how their nervous systems and so on impact their health outcomes. It is very much part of my mission here on Earth to make sure that this changes. Right? And that's the heart of my work at Hope for Dystonia, empowering us to connect with what's within so that we can change the outcomes that we produce with our bodies and our psyche and our health in general. So you know the rest of the story in a way, in that I, at a certain point, was just in bed all the time and couldn't do anything. And I was just watching my thoughts and watching my body, and I had to surrender to what was happening. And that's how I started trusting the signals that I was getting from my body. And that's how I started developing the Hope for Dystonia method. And if you want to learn more about it, there's plenty of videos on the channel. There's the video on how I got my life back. And if you're interested in the specifics of kind of how this works, then in the description below, you have the link to the 8 steps of the recovery roadmap, all the life-changing information that helped me get my life back and that empowers my clients as well. So you can have that emailed to you if you click on that link below. Yeah, so I'm just trying to sense if there's something else that I want to share with you guys. But I think it's enough for now. I rarely allow myself to kind of vent, right? And to complain and to just kind of share how hard this was, how freaking horrible this was. And just how much this journey is one that has gifts that keep on giving, right? So you know that I'm now able to speak for entire days, right, with my clients, and I'm able to go kayaking and to do all kinds of things that would have been unthinkable. But obviously, I'm not quite at the finishing line until this bite is stabilized and closed and so on. And I'm intentionally taking it slow because I want to give an opportunity to this left side of my cranium to kind of even out as much as it can. I want to give an opportunity to what needs to be released in terms of the restrictions in the cranium and elsewhere to release. I want this left side of the jaw to continue becoming stronger and stronger. So I can even out the flow of energy in my body, so I don't have, the super destructive, debilitating symptoms of dystonia that I used to have. But obviously, sometimes my brain still has the temptation to kind of let go here, and I have to um, work with my ability to distribute energy internally to even those things out, those two sides, and find that kind of symmetry. And little by little, allow things to continue to align. So there is a physical side of this journey that, you know, is still happening. There are gifts that it keeps on giving. And those gifts are embodiment that keeps on deepening, and the ability to really connect and learn to manage these subtle patterns of energy, subtle and not so subtle. And then there's the journey of the trauma healing and the detox, which you can learn about again with those 8 steps and all the other components of the Hope for Dystonia Recovery Roadmap. And it's an ever deepening journey of surrender, of communion, right, with the divine, of learning how to bring love where it's needed, how to live from the heart, from a place of regulation, and so on and so forth. And so I'm saying this because even though this was a video about how horrible things were, I always say this to my clients, and sometimes they believe me right away and sometimes they don't, but life happens for us, not to us, right? Life happens for us to grow. The challenges that we have here are here for us to grow, to awaken, to open our hearts, to become more and more who we really are meant to be, who we really are. And dystonia, healing, and healing from trauma, and all of these things, these are apparent obstacles that hide so much growth and opportunity within them. And as hard as it's been, I wouldn't change my journey for anything else in the world. So thank you so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the community that is beginning to form right here on YouTube, for the community of clients that already exists. And there are great things that are coming with Hope for Dystonia. I really look forward to sharing all of them with you. Much love, and see you soon.